Our last author tonight, Nikole Hannah-Jones, as I mentioned at the beginning of this event, will not be able to join us in person, but we are going to play a video of her discussing her book, which is, of course, the 1619 Project. Nikole Hannah-Jones is a Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter covering racial injustice for the New York Times Magazine and a creator of the landmark 1619 Project, which I know everyone here has heard so much about. In 2017, she received a MacArthur Foundation Fellowship, known as the Genius Grant, for her work on educational inequality. She has also won a Peabody Award, 2 George Polk Awards, 3 National Magazine Awards, and the 2018 John Chancellor Award for Excellence in Journalism from Columbia University. In 2016, Hannah-Jones created the Ida B. Wells Society for Investigative Reporting, a training and mentorship organization geared toward increasing the number of investigative reporters of color. She is the Knight Chair in Race and Journalism at Howard University, where she has founded the Center for Journalism and Democracy. And in 2021, she was named one of Time's 100 most influential people in the world. So we are now going to play a short video of her talking about her book.
The 1619 Project is a series of essays, of short stories, of poems, and photography that really examines the 400-year legacy of American slavery. So the year 1619 marks the year that the first Africans were sold into the colony of Virginia. And through this series of essays, we really argue that very little about modern American life has been left untouched by this foundational institution. I've been obsessed with the year 1619 since I was a high school student. That's when I first was introduced to the date by my Black history teacher in Waterloo, Iowa. And I realized that that date was foundational, and yet no one had ever thought to teach us that date. And it really symbolized to me both how long Black people had been in this country, how foundational slavery was to America, and also the power of erasure about who gets to decide what dates and what stories are important and what dates and what stories get left out. So I've been thinking about this date for a very long time, and I've also spent 20 years as a journalist trying to use the past to help us understand the inequality that we see in American life today. So as the 400-year anniversary of the year 1619 was approaching, I just kept thinking that this foundational American date, this momentous moment of 400 years of American slavery was approaching, and yet most Americans still had never heard of the date 1619. And I was no longer a high school student, but I was a journalist at the New York Times with one of the biggest platforms in the world. And so I decided to pitch a project that would really, I hoped, force us to confront what does it mean that slavery is one of the oldest institutions in America, and how has that legacy shaped the country that we live in. I knew that I couldn't just write a single essay, that for me to write a piece would not be big enough for this project to really do what it needed to do, which was force this reckoning, that I wanted to take all of these aspects of American life that we think have nothing to do with slavery, things like democracy and capitalism and music and our legal system and even our highway system, and show that that legacy of slavery permeates so much of our society. And so I pitched the original project, which was a project of the New York Times Magazine. And then, of course, after that, realized that there's still so many stories we hadn't told, so many areas of American life that we hadn't had a chance to talk about in the original project, and many ways that we wanted to expand the essays that were in the project in the New York Times. And that's how we decided to turn the original 1619 project into a book, which would allow us, with more time and more writers and more space, to more fully tell this story. This probably won't be that surprising to the general public, because the thing that probably surprised me the most while working on this project is also the thing that has surprised other Americans the most, and that has really led to so much of the argument around the project, which is the role of slavery in the American Revolution. I realized that even as someone who has studied Black history in this country for more than half of my life, even as someone who's been very skeptical of American narratives of exceptionalism, I'd never really questioned what slavery and the preservation of slavery and the role of slavery might have played in that era of the American Revolution. Most of my studying had been about the era in the 1800s going forward. And it was in researching and reading for this project and really trying to make an argument about democracy that I came to understand how big of a deal slavery was even in 1776, and how enslaved people were not just sitting idly by waiting on white people and white colonists and what they were going to do, but that they were actors and that they were seeking their freedom, and that it was their actions that in some ways led some of our most prominent founders to decide that they wanted to join the revolution.